Hi, it's Friday and time to look back at what happened at Queen's Park and Ontario politics this week. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen after a very busy week for many. The situation in hospitals and ICUs worsens and measures are taken. Students return to school on Monday, January the 17th. There are lots of questions for the government and decisions for parents to make. Minister Rod Phillips resigns. He announces his resignation before the end of his term, and I want to talk about why that bothers me. There were new highs in this fifth wave for hospitalizations and ICU occupancy because of COVID. This wave is reaching older Ontarians, as we can see from the increased cases amongst residents and staff in long-term care homes. More on that later. Some measures were taken. Patients can now be transferred without their consent between hospitals, and foreign trained nurses as well as students will be brought in to work under supervision. On Monday, Liberal leader Stephen Del held a multi-party summit to talk about the hospital staffing crisis, and that was followed by a letter to Premier Ford where he said, quote, "We need a health human resources strategy urgently, or the crisis in healthcare will only continue to get worse." One of the calls by the opposition is to repeal Bill 124, which limits pay increases for nurses. Back of school was top of mind for families with kids in school, especially younger kids. There was a lot of consensus that school is important, getting back to school in person is important to mitigate the education disruption and for students' mental health. And also that ages 5 to 19 are least likely to have serious disease. But parents have had a lot of questions, a lot of last-minute questions, and there was much apprehension about the preparation for back to school. So some of the questions were, can parents be told whether HEPA filter systems, masks, and rapid tests have been delivered to each of the schools and classes? Can extra testing, including PCR testing, be available for families with kids, especially those under 5, which remain unvaccinated? Will schools be able to tell parents about other cases in the school? What about school buses? What about lunches? Can educators be prioritized for boosters? What about poorly worn masks, which is a pretty common thing in schools? I just think that it's the fifth wave now, and a lot of these things could have been worked out earlier. Premier Ford's former Environment Minister, Jeff Yurek, and current Long-Term Care Minister, Rod Phillips, announced that they would be quitting and resigning their seats next month. So presumably that is before the legislature resumes sitting, which is in late February. What bothers me about that is that they aren't serving out their mandates, so their constituencies are not getting represented for several months. Their offices are closing early. Also means that their staff will lose their jobs right away. Contrast this with Kingston and the Islands MPP Ian Arthur, who is not running again, but serving out his full term until June the 2nd. What bothers me even more, and what I think is a bigger issue, is that Mr. Phillips is the long-term care minister. And if you remember, I mentioned that rise in COVID cases amongst staff and residents in long-term care homes. I think this is just not a great time to have to replace the minister of long-term care. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Otherwise, join me next week as I look back at what happened at Queen's Park and Ontario politics.